Welcome to the DNX podcast. My name is Sylvia Christman and I am your host, and I'm here today with my friend Katia Bozhikova, who's a friend of mine from New York, and the last time that I saw her, she hosted a dinner party called Dinner with Death. Hello and welcome, Katia. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. The last time I saw you, you were hosting this interesting dinner party called Dinner with Death, and I thought it was such a beautiful way of approaching the conversation of death and dying. And you yourself, you have cancer, and I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about what that is like, and where and how is it affecting your life today?
So, just a little bit of a background. I'm 35, so just a month ago I turned 35, and cancer actually has been with me for the past 8 years. It started with breast cancer stage 1, and then this February I got diagnosed with stage 4. So just to give a little bit of the key facts, because I always like to call it the dance with cancer. It's not something new for me, but of course when it hits this new stage, it transforms, of course, the conversation for me and everybody around me, which is, of course, what inspired also Dinner with Death, and I'll say a little bit more about that. How is it living with cancer? Actually, surprisingly, very peaceful. It has a lot of ups and downs, because, of course, it's a journey that requires a lot of physical interventions. However, what I've learned is that for me, and I underline this for me, there's been a lot more surprising positive moments than anybody would tell you that are connected to something like, like a terminal condition, or at least a condition that has no cure.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that you are in a terminal condition now?
Well, we all have a terminal condition called life. Just to give a little bit of, like the sanity and fact check for everybody. I think, of course, when you have like a condition where, let's say the process of disintegration is a little more accelerated, I think it's very easy to fall into stories. And I've actually worked a lot in the last couple of months to not get attached to stories, meaning nobody can really tell me when I'm going to die. Even if a doctor tells me it's 3 months, it's a year, but still nobody knows the exact date. And that's actually a very beautiful uncertainty that hasn't been taken away from me compared to anybody who is right now at stage healthy. And that gives me a very different perspective to live with. And again, I would just like to underline, this is my personal experience. And a lot of these topics, what I'm also learning is there's a semantic and theoretical story that we as a society and people share. And it's very different when one applies this to one's personal life,
Why is it so important for you to have this conversation around death, dying, and cancer?
So, of course, one thing that I noticed is when the diagnosis came, and I, of course, delivered it to my family and friends, I noticed that there was no space that I was given to speak about death. Because, of course, you have to lay out all the options on the table when you're presented with a challenge, whether that's, whether you're standing between 3 doors, you cannot just say, like, I'm going to ignore door 3 because my society says it's taboo. And in my case, door 3 is speaking about the imminent fact that I might die very soon. So that was very fascinating first, because I think, and I had to learn it myself through this process, death is a very natural part of life. There is no inhale without exhale, which is, like a very good exercise of what living and dying is about. And not being allowed to think about it actually creates a lot of fear and anxiety in a person that has to go through it. Like, it's very easy to feel like you're doing something wrong, and something very wrong and punishing is happening to you. And I had to really work to be able to recognize that with myself, and then actually say that to my friends and family in order to open that space and be able to think and talk about stuff like, I maybe should think about my will, or how would I like my funeral to be? And all of these things sound so gruesome, but are they really? Because they're a natural part of life. And if they sound gruesome, is it really a story that we've built over years and years? And then, like it opens like a whole different gateway of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, I've had a living will. I've created a living will probably a decade ago, and I renew it or I change it, every couple of years. And going through that process of writing your living will really forces you to think through those ideas if you're open to it. And I was surprised to see how few people actually have a living will, which gives you an opportunity to write out at any time, in any stage in your life, how you would like that to take place and what you would like people around you to do with your remains or your belongings.
Exactly. And you see, like, even my own naivety, I've been dealing with cancer since 2010. And only now, 8 years later, did I think of creating this will. So that shows you just like even my own denial over the past couple of years. But I do also believe the saying, and confirmed again through my experience, thinking about your death really makes you think about how you want to live.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree on that too. What's been the biggest change for you over the last few months that was surprisingly positive?
So a couple of things. Maybe the one that I noticed is how fragmented my days were, and actually pulling away from fragmentation, which meant, we search for so much gratification on the outside, whether that's like from instant chatting or running to different events. And I noticed that I really never sat with myself to really have like a chunk of time, whether that's 4 hours, I really just sink in and not plan everything, but allow things to happen. So that I feel like it opened me really to find joy in little things, whether that's like washing something in the sink and just really being into the vegetables that I'm washing, or really sitting in the park and just allowing for everything to come through. The sound of the birds, the trees, that has been really, really beautiful, because it allowed me to notice that all of the pieces actually within me, all I needed to do is just actually drop a few things. I didn't have to search for something. I just had to uncover it. Hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I think being present and learning to be present, because you start valuing life on a moment to moment basis. It's a beautiful thing. And it's really hard to do. It's very hard to do.
And especially because we tend to look for things outside and thinking, I need this to be complete. But actually, it's rather like you're taking off extra garment that you have when the weather outside is too warm. This is what it felt like. And it still feels like.
Does it feel like that every day?
No, sometimes it really feels like somebody's pulling the skin off my face because we tend to be attached to some of the garment that we're wearing, if I use that metaphor again. And that actually shows what things I am attached to that are not serving me anymore in particular situation. And what I'm observing, of course, is I'm going through a lot of change very quickly. My body, in order to rebalance my body, sometimes it's day to day, I need something different. So I need to adapt very quickly. And if one day, I'm low energy, but I try to get through all my schedule and run around through the city, I'll just crash. And I learned that lesson the hard way. So it was really just checking with me on a daily basis and saying, what do you need today? And letting go of any expectation that it will be what I planned the day before. So I have to go through this a lot quicker, I think, than, let's compare like the average healthy person has to go through.
Right.
Yeah.
So you said earlier something I thought was quite profound, and that's you're more than your body. What does that mean to you?
So, of course, cancer is a disease or a challenge that really strips you away from a lot of stories that you've created. And for me, that was when from the treatment, for example, I started losing my hair, or my bones will hurt one day. So I really had to start asking the question, what is pain, or what does it mean to really lose my hair? Does it really does the hair really define who I am? And if I think that it does, why? So I had to really go deeper into those questions. And of course, if the body slowly disintegrates, which will happen again to everybody, in my case, it's an accelerated process. The question is, who is that I that is observing the body disintegrating? Who is that I that stays behind it, that still, despite of all this, is experiencing peace? And I would not like to deliver an answer, because that answer is a very personal journey. I would just like to pose the question to everybody and say, everybody will go through this process of losing the body. It's been given to us. It doesn't stay behind. So the question is, what stays behind? And again, the answer is a very, very personal one, because the way we draw the geography of what is behind the body is, I think, a big chunk of what this journey on Earth is about.
Yeah. What are you personally most afraid of?
That changes also daily. Fear of death is definitely here. I think when you have the condition of being alive, it's part of it. And it's interesting that it's not like I am afraid of dying every single day, because I don't feel it every single day, but we've constructed our lives around being afraid of dying. So often, if I lose something that points to the fear of death on a daily basis, it can really throw me for a trip. For example, I had a brain surgery a couple of weeks ago to remove a tumor from my brain. Fascinatingly enough, I was not that afraid of the surgery. I just had a lot of confidence in my medical team and my care from my friends around me. But then a couple of days after the surgery, I lost my journal for an hour or two. I couldn't find it. And I completely fell apart. And it's interesting because you would expect that if somebody drills in your head, that will make you fall apart. But what made me fall apart is the fact that journal was my brain for the past 5 months, because I've been experiencing, fatigue and low energy and issues with my vision. So I've been writing down things in my journal, which have become my pathway in my brain for the 5 months. And actually, that was what pointed more to what I'm losing rather than the surgery. And these little surprises hide everywhere during the day. And I think we're all experiencing them. This was just a very interesting one for me. Because people always tell me, oh, you're so brave. You went through this and that surgery so well. But the interesting thing is, sometimes when shock and strength come in one way, but then they kind of tend to brush some of the other stuff in a different object. And that object was my journal. So I do still experiencing those things. It's just interesting how they come in my daily round.
Mm. Yeah, fear has an interesting way of expressing itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did it transform the relationships in your life?
Very, very differently. And that has been a question that I've revisited every single time that I've been presented with the diagnosis. So this is actually the third time I have a diagnosis. So the first time, 2010, 2014, I had a surgery, and now, of course, stage 4. I feel like it's always a reflection of how far I can take people on a journey with me. So with my family, for example, everybody's reacted very differently. It was difficult with my mother, for example, because I think to be faced with the question, with the realization that your child might die before you is something that, again, is this huge assumption that many of us make, that it should not be part of the natural progression of life. Again, that's a very hard assumption. So I think this is the work that she's doing on herself. And it was hard to reconcile the conversation between us in a way that it didn't cause emotional, explosions. And that was surprising to me, that it really took a while for us to find that, to even that space. The most positive, surprising part was, living in New York. Everybody assumes we kind of like loners. Everybody is so independent and works for themselves. And you kind of see people only if there's an interest there. I mean, there's this story, and I've lived here for 4 years right now, and I've definitely kind of lived with it. But the last year I moved in with 3 people, and we didn't know each other that well. We've known each other for less than 2 years. And for me to notice that actually my diagnosis created even a stronger bond between us, to where it feels like a family, and it is a family, was a beautiful surprise. And I'm so grateful to find people that are willing to lean into my pain, because they do experience me at my lowest points. That's just a testimony of, of how pain can actually really open us to our humanity, to our hearts, instead of making us run away from it.
No. That's a really beautiful story. Do you think, I mean, as far as I've witnessed this from the outside, I travel a lot, but I've seen it from afar and up close, how beautiful community has shown up for you, and our community has shown up for you and kind of been there for you, and also gathered around to openly discuss this topic, hence Dinner with Death. There was, you were saying earlier that you were surprised how many people showed up for this conversation and the dinner.
Yeah, it was interesting because the dinner emerged from a conversation I had with a friend, Andrew, who actually co-hosted the dinner with me, Andrew Kippen. It was fascinating because I was actually, sharing that realization with him that I've noticed how the fact that I'm facing death has actually kept some people away from my friends, or even I felt like they're not necessarily their authentic self around me, because it's like an unspoken question, or the pink elephant in the room, which is death. So that's why I decided let's just host something that's focused completely on it. We can even talk about it. You can ask me anything you want about my experience, and I'll try to be very truthful about answering all the questions. And I organized the dinner with the assumption, I don't think that so many people will respond to it. And the surprise was when my apartment turned out to be full. There were over 30 people here. And again, I'm grateful that so many people actually trusted me that I can lead them through this topic. And it was in the form of a Q&A where we had a bowl with people dropping questions anonymously on a sheet of paper, and me answering them. And it was very beautiful to notice, actually, that the curiosity of people is there. I also recognize the need to actually create space where others can speak about their experience, instead of just me being in the center of the attention. So I'm really fascinated that, that this need is there among younger people, and I hope I can respond by organizing more of this events in the future.
Yeah. I thought it was one of the interesting questions that you were answering, or I don't even know, I can't remember what the question was, but it was about how people stopped telling you what was going on in their lives because they felt that it didn't compare to what you were going through. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact question. I still have them written down, and because I'm intending to share them, the answers in a written form with everybody from the dinner. So that's something that I've been observing a lot. And, we tend to classify things in our life, in our experiences. And that's a very interesting form of judgment that we exercise. And, cancer is higher than divorce, is higher than me complaining about my boss, etc. We tend to classify things. And it's not what happens to you, it's how you take it. It's a beautiful saying that I've believed my whole life, because in the end, it's not about the external conditions, it's about what it arises within you. And when I meet a person, I want to meet them at the soul level. I don't want to meet them at the external experience level. And that's why I responded in that way in the question, saying it's not about everybody comparing whether them getting angry in the subway at somebody is lower than me having cancer. I still would like to hear what's happening and what are you experiencing, so I can support you on your path, just like I am getting support. But we cannot just say, I'm going to support somebody if they get into the cancer stage. And we tend to do that not only for other people, we tend to do that for ourselves as well. That judgment actually is worse when applied to our own selves. When you sit in front of the mirror and you say to yourself, I'm not supposed to get angry at a person on the subway, because if you're getting angry, just, the reality is there, just admit that feeling, allow it, because trapping them actually is worse. Yeah. Because we're not honest with each other.
Yeah, that's very true. Oh, we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much, Katia. This was such an enriching interview. I really appreciate everything that you've shared, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for allowing me to speak about this.
Of course. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Join us at the DNX Festival in September in Lisbon. If you go to our website and use the promo code podcast50, you get an extra 50 euros off your ticket. And subscribe to this channel and leave us a review if you can. We will review these frequently, and you can leave us a question that we will answer live online. Until next time.